Yeah, good morning, Sean. Thanks very much. I am indeed. Like I said to Steve last night, I pulled an all-nighter last night, just to make sure that I didn't wake up too late for this morning's thing. So yeah, yeah. If only, If only my body was young enough to allow that. But no, thanks very much, everybody, for being here. This is one of us. I think the first of a couple of special tech talks that we're probably going to be doing in the future. We've got a couple of us that have done tech talks in the past, and there are always quite a few questions that come through. So we thought we'd all get together and sort of sit on a panel and answer questions. So this morning it's myself and Steve Brown and Adrian Myberg and Mr. Marius from the Southern Cape there, who is going to be answering all the, I'm sure, timber support questions, Marius? So that's going to be good. And no, but the jokes aside, this is quite a light-hearted, I suppose, session. It's not anything heavy in terms of information. I'm hoping that the questions that are going to come through are interesting, and that we can, fulfill our part and answer them properly and fully. As always, this is for all of our benefits, and if something isn't able to be answered properly on the day, I think we all agree that we're happy to get an email or a telephone call after the fact, for a particular query that couldn't be answered, and we can straighten it out then. So yeah, that's it. Sean, I believe the way that it's going to go is you've got a bunch of questions in front of you, and you're just going to shoot it out, and we're going to see who answers it.
All right, perfect. Yes, I do have a couple of questions just here from the panelists themselves. But guys, this is also just to answer any and all questions we have got from you. So while we are going through this, just go ahead, start putting your questions into the questions tab, and then we'll get to them in short order. All right, we have got the first question here for you, Mr. Bailey. Just decide who it goes to. The question reads, what type of backflow device is required at a water meter? Could I use a spring-loaded non-return valve or a brass flat type check valve?
The former, not the latter. So you can only use a spring-loaded check valve. That is acceptable for a water meter. Although I must just say that a check valve, a spring-loaded check valve, is not considered a backflow prevention device. It is what it is. It's just a check valve. But that is what's required at a meter. So if you need to install a backflow prevention device somewhere where there's a hazardous situation, a photographic studio or slaughterhouse or morgue for that matter, or whatever, then there are other specific requirements. Then stuff like check valves and that sort of thing fall out of the window completely, and you need to actually do a little bit of investigation to see what type of backflow prevention devices you require. The most common one that we use quite often here in the Cape, because a lot of guys are tanking non-potable water, and so if you've got any kind of non-potable water at hooked up to a mains, you need to then install a RPZ or reduced pressure zone backflow preventer between the connection and the meter. So that's like a minimum requirement for that particular installation. But if you're just talking about a regular meter installation, supplying a regular place with regular potable water, you'll use a spring-loaded valve.
All right, we have got a comment here from the audience. It reads, water meters in general have non-return valves fitted.
Correct. That is correct. And some even have strainers. So if that's the case, you need a strainer, you need a non-return valve, and that's it. So if it's fitted into the water meter, Bob's your uncle.
I think also, Richard, just for comment there, In terms of that question, quite correct in terms of the non-return valve being installed in the water meter. But what actually happens, a couple of years ago here in Durban, they had issues with regards to water meters, calibration, and repairs and replacements. And what was actually being done is the water meter was actually being removed and just a bridge piece between the communication pipe and the inlet to the property. And that took away any of the actual protective measures in terms of that installation. So just again, belts and braces in terms of that installation, and then specific in terms of the check valve, and the water meter is separate, but it does have that non-return valve in it.
Maybe Steve, from my side, we have found that the water meters in the Southern Cape do not all have them. In fact, that we have bouncing meters that sort of flow back as well. So you do get some here that don't have that backflow device in it. So the guys must check, because I've had some of the inspections where the guys come, they said, but the meter is supposed to have it, and it's not always there. And it's difficult to actually ascertain if it's got it. So I think maybe as a rule of thumb, we should you should have a backflow prevention of some sort in front of your meter anyway. Not just assume that it's got it unless you can put out a positive information or a proof that it has it in already.
Perfect, well done.
If I can just butt in here quickly, I'm not quite sure about the date. You can check the articulated website, but there is I think it's a 2-part series done around backflow prevention in a couple of weeks, maybe a month or so, a month and a half. I can't remember the dates, but there is a 2-part series dealing with backflow only, and the various fittings and where they fit in and how they're supposed to work and when you use which fitting. So it might be something that the guys can look at.
All right. All right. We have got a question here from the audience. It reads, if a plumber is not PIRB registered, how do we investigate their work, and how are they taken to task on non-compliance issues? Is there legal action?
I'll answer that one. I think, yeah, sorry, who wants to jump? Adrian?
Yeah, can I just the short and sweet answer. When it comes to the enforcement of the national building regulations and other standards, it falls under the jurisdiction of the local authority. And I know everybody's jumping up and down in their chairs saying, but it doesn't happen. We don't have guys cooperating, blah, blah, blah. The main thing is this: when it comes to the enforcement of the standards, yes, we've got IOPSA for companies, we've got PIRB for individuals, but when it comes to guys that flat out refuse to be a part of either of those two, your first port of call is your local authority. If nothing happens after that, you can start taking it further. I know Steve and them have gotten involved in various areas, in various places with regards to that. But ultimately, the building control officer for that area is responsible for that work being done in his area.
Yeah, but I think also, Adrian, where we are, I mean, the standards are very clear. If we're talking hot water, solar, heat pumps, etc., the requirement is that you have to be licensed and registered, and you are required to issue that COC. So I think the more and more of the consumers are getting aware of this, and I think it's just for the plumbers in terms of the communications that I've had over the last couple of months, is that we need to emphasize the fact from the plumbers themselves. So if you're pricing work or whatever, I talk about putting meat into the pie. The more you create awareness to the consumer in terms of you're going to get a COC, there are repercussions, there is support structures in place, and that you're providing that quality of installation, that in the event of there being a problem that occurs, is that there is accountability. And I think that's what we need to stand up for, is that accountability. So these guys that are running around and flying under the radar, we will not know who they are unless people tell us who they are or give us direction to go there. So as I've got this week, where a second plumber has gone onto site, seen the installation and how bad it is, it's come through the consumer to ourselves, and we can pick it up from there. So it is one of those functions that the regions will get involved, but let's just start closing the door and standing up for what our rights are, if I can call it that.
All right, the next question we've got here is, may a COC be issued by a plumber on an existing house for sale, and what is the requirements?
Should I take that one? This is,
Yeah, jump, Richard, because it happens more in the Cape than it does elsewhere.
yeah, because the Cape has got the city of Cape Town has got a schedule. What do they call it? A schedule 4,
4.
schedule 14. No, don't quote me. Don't shoot me. I just can't remember off the top of my head. A schedule 4 or schedule 14 COC that is downloadable from their website, and that is specifically for the sale of property within the Cape Metropole. So for the sale of property, estate agents, transfer attorneys, and buyers, for that matter, would only require that. If somebody who knows about the PIRB COC, for example, a buyer, has heard about the PIRB COC, knows a little bit more about it, and knows that it carries a little bit more weight, and insists that this is the COC that they want before they buy the property, unfortunately, they can't get it. I mean, unless a guy's really willing to take a hell of a risk. But the PIRB COC is to be used for self-certification only. So when I have done work that I have done myself or supervised personally, I may issue that COC. I can't issue a COC for my friend who is not PIRB registered next door, who's just done a solar geyser installation, and he asked me to issue that COC. I may not do that. Likewise, I can't go to a home that I bear no knowledge of, and I can only see what's outside of the walls. I can only see what's in the, and I certify the entire thing on a PIRB COC. That's a no-no, because you open yourself up for all kinds of responsibilities, and besides, it's not what the thing was intended to be for in any event. And if you want to add
Richard,
anything to that?
Yeah, just to emphasize on that, guys, what we have had is there are situations where that does occur, and basically what it is we created a checklist, and this is not to contradict what Richard's saying, but where the emphasis has been on that is that there is a checklist that we've created. It's on the IOPSA website. I think if you go to the plumber's shop, it's there. So basically what it is that the inspection is done and carried out in terms of what's been done, and all of those items are cross-referenced and done. And then there's a quotation submitted to the consumer to actually rectify those items. So again, just don't go in and do a blanket of, well, I'm just going to sign the COC off, because we have had situations where the auditor's gone to site, had a COC, it encompasses all plumbing work, and we found that there's a huge amount of non-compliant items that's there, and then the plumber is responsible for it. So just stay very clear from that one.
Steve, can I come in there?
Yep.
What I've had in the past year as well is that a major gym company was sold as well, and a COC was requested. I have used the COC, and same as, not to contradict what Richard has said, but on that then there's an attachment added, and that whole checklist has gone through. But just to give you an idea, this checklist was written up, and it was a 40-page document with photos and every single thing and item specified in there. So it can become quite involved. And if you are doing something like that, you must make sure that you are very knowledgeable on the standards, because you'll have to go and quote everything. So if it goes to a court of law eventually, and they question you and say, but you've issued the certificate of compliance, you must be able to defend it. So it must be made sure that you are very, very knowledgeable on the standards when you are doing something like that. And it will involve a major attachment to that document then. The COC will just be the vessel to identify that a COC has been given, but you'll have a big attachment added to it.
Perfect, well done.
All right, getting straight into the next question. It reads, the check valve in front of the water meter or after?
It'll be downstream of the water meter.
It'll be downstream of the meter. That's right. Yes. So after. Guys, Steve, Adrian, and Marius, I've just seen a message from Shania that we are actually dawdling by answering these questions. There've only been three questions, and we're 15 minutes in, so I think we must lift our pace. Lift our socks, eh? Pull up those socks, please. Okay.
All right. The next question reads then. Next question reads, is it a requirement that a backflow preventer must be installed at washing machine points?
Yes, some sort of a backflow prevention device must be installed there because of the fact that if you have a negative pressure situation, burst pipe down the hill, you have a negative pressure and your washing machine is full of water, the drum is full of water. I'm not throwing a blanket over every single machine. Some machines may or may not have built-in non-return valves, that's fine. But as a plumbing requirement, you're going to need to prevent the backflow sucking of that dirty water into the water supply, so yes.
Right, the next question reads, when is the PIRB COC going to become the national standard for all plumbing COCs? Great that it is for geysers, solar and heat pump, one COC throughout the nation.
Yeah, I
Steve?
think I'll answer that one. Yes, I think it's a work in progress, guys. So let's just have a look at it and see. You know, it kicked off with solar, excuse me, and then heat pumps, and then obviously geysers. And it is being worked on in terms of, we were at the TAC meeting last week, and it is being driven to go through all the relevant standards. There are some that are up for rewrite, so it is being put in there, and it is our mandate to get that. So yes, work in progress. How long it's going to take? Yeah, I couldn't tell you. A couple of years, but we're all on the right track for it, as other municipalities are also pulling it up in terms of applying the PIRB COC and not their own. So yes, we are on a road and a journey, but we are way down that road.
All right, so I'll get straight into the next one. The next question reads, a massive retirement village in Gauteng has been given a company letterhead as an official COC to allow occupation. What do I do?
I think that's an incomplete question, and that warrants a hell of a lot more time and effort and detail. Yeah, I'm not sure who the asker of that question is. I don't know if he's obviously a PIRB registered plumber. I don't know if he could be an auditor. But gosh, I mean, that requires a whole bunch of more detail.
It is quite a detailed one to get into, but in essence, we have seen guys that are actually trying to write out their own COCs and submitting them and everything else. Okay, but basically the requirement is that in that installation, whether it be heat pump, solar, whatever the case may be, it would have been required to have had the PIRB COC for those standards that require it, and it would become part and parcel of the requirements for the occupational certificate to be issued. But I think if you bring that info through, send it through to Sean and Richard, and we'll basically put something together. But thank you, good question.
All right, perfect. The next question reads, can IOPSA or PIRB not have printed carbonized pads printed of non-compliant installations?
We do have, well, again, it goes back to a cost. Okay, so, and what we're trying to do is try and keep those costs down. So if there is sufficient support for that, obviously there would be a cost for each one of those. But what we are seeing is the guys going to the plumber's shop, they purchase and download the non-compliance form that we have, which basically, guys, is also up for review. But basically at 50 Rand, and then you can utilize that as many times as you can. But if there is sufficient support for actually putting it in the booklet form, then yeah, we would gladly do that. But obviously what we're trying to do is try and keep costs down as much as possible.
All right, perfect. The next question reads, why Durban inspector is not acknowledging PIRB licensed PIRB plumbers? They say must have a Durban ticket.
Okay, Durban, I'll answer. Richard, I'll jump in. Durban, like Cape Town, have their own registration in terms of plumbers. It's one of the few metropolitan areas that do. I work with the inspectors, and I know them very well. They have their registration, but by virtue of the fact that they apply the standards, this is where it comes through in terms of their application of the standards. They require that all plumbing must be in accordance to the standards. Therefore, they have to abide by the recommendations or the standards which state there very clearly that only a licensed plumber can issue certificates of compliance, etc. So yes, belts and braces in Durban. And when they say that they don't support the PIRB, well, I know the guy very well. We deal with each other on a sort of weekly basis, whatever. We bounce off each other. So in essence, If you are a licensed plumber with PIRB, you will still have to do the Durban Metropolitan or eThekwini test. So it's not a case of not recognizing, it's a case of you have to register with them as a responsible plumber.
All right, the next question reads, Cape Town plumbers are registered with the council. Building inspectors are happy to accept this for occupational certificates of completion on new builds. How is this possible, given that the PIRB is saying that only PIRB registered plumbers may do this?
So at the moment, the requirement or the legislation states that the only 3 installations that are compulsory. Let me start that again. That require PIRB COCs as a compulsory thing is geysers, heat pumps, and solars. So beyond that, it's not a legal requirement that a PIRB registered plumber does the rest of the work, strictly speaking. However, more and more in Cape Town, I'm finding that the building control officers and building inspectors and water inspectorate are actually asking for, well, certainly the building control officers are asking for PIRB COCs on the whole property to be issued before they issue occupation certificates. That's certainly the case in the last, well, I've seen it often. So I think there's more than one faction, not faction, but there's more than one practice happening at the moment in Cape Town. I'm not quite sure how that happens, but it's not a national requirement beyond the geyser, the heat pump, or the solar, and so that's where the little loophole sits. I don't know if you want to add something there, Marius, or Adrian might know a bit more about how that works, even though you're in PE.
You make it sound like there's something wrong with that.
Okay.
But anyway,
No, we didn't.
the point is that anyway, the point is, yes, it ultimately there's a bit of a gap outside of those 3 installations that are required by law. There's a general school of thought that there should be, I hate to put it back onto the BCO because it's not always possible, but there should be someone looking at the drainage and the cold water and the sanitary ware and the compliance of the sanitary ware within the metro boundaries. There's that assumption that that is the case, or that is actually happening. And whilst it's not always done like that, the responsibility is also, the flip side of the coin is there are a whole lot of PIRB registered licensed plumbers that are doing ticking the box for the solar or the heat pump, or not the geyser, but on a new build on the solar or the heat pump, but not ticking the cold water and sanitary ware box. So only taking responsibility, doing the whole job, ticking the solar or the heat pump, and then you're stuck with the rest of it. So I think that the thing goes both ways, but I'll be the first to add from our side, or from the local authority side, things have improved vastly. When I say vastly, I mean from guys running away to now actually signing for what they do.
Adrian, can I add that as well?
Yes.
Okay, basically SANS 10400 being the National Building Regulation 18 says control of plumbers and plumbing work. No person shall perform the trade of plumbing as contemplated in government notice of 31st of August 1979 unless he is a trained plumber or works under the adequate control of a trained plumber or an approved competent person. So what else does it state? It says any trained plumber who causes or permits any person who is not a trained plumber to practice the trade of plumbing without adequately controlling the work done by such person shall be guilty of an offence. So then it says what falls under the National Building Regulation. SANS 10252 Part 1, SANS 10254, 10106, and 1352. So as you mentioned there, Richard, is SANS 10254 being geysers, 10106 solars, 1352 specifically states that a certificate of compliance of the professional body will be issued. But SANS 10252 falls under the National Building Regulation, saying that you must be a trained and registered plumber. So once again, nothing stops you from issuing a certificate of compliance because you must be a trained and licensed plumber. So that is all encompassing. So we all fall under the National Building Regulation. And that all states that we must be registered and licensed. So that is what the professional body is doing. So we're encompassed by the National Building Regulation.
Yeah, I think, Maurice, if I can just say one last thing, must just be careful not to confuse, because at the moment, if I go and do a drainage installation as a PIRB registered plumber, I'm not obliged to issue a PIRB certificate on that installation. PIRB cannot instruct or force. It is one of the rules. It is one of the guidelines that PIRB have in place. Please issue COCs on stuff that is that falls with outside of those three installations, the geyser, heat pump, and solar. If it falls outside of one of those three, then usually anything in the value of 1,500 Rand or more. But we can't legally force the issuing of these things, nor can we sanction people that don't, unless I'm got it wrong. But I don't think we can, because it's not a mandate. It's not a legal mandate. It's a recommendation, but it's not a mandate. So basically what I'm saying is that the local authority can or can choose not to require a PIRB certificate for an entire property. They can choose to only require a PIRB certificate for a geyser, for example, on that property. Please, somebody correct me if I'm wrong.
Are you 100% correct there? That's why I said the guys, there's a flip side to the coin. We're looking at the guys that are not registered, not signing these things, but there are also, when you sign up to become a PIRB or you register with PIRB, it's one of the requirements at 1,500 Rand and more that you will then issue or self-certify your work. So if the guys that are registered are not doing it, then it becomes more and more difficult to police. But like I say, according to building regulations, the drainage and all the rest of that falls under the local authority. So whether they choose to or whether they ignore it, the fact is that if a plumber does that, there's a set of rules that says you have to have your work inspected before putting it into use. So whether you self-certify and it gets audited, or whether you do the local authority route, at some stage someone else other than the plumber doing the drainage should actually have a look at that to approve it.
All right. We do have less than a minute, so I am going to go ahead and stick with a quick question here. The question reads, what type of NRV must be used on a solar installation?
Should I take that one? It cannot be, because somewhere in 10252, I think, they talk about the flap type metal to metal unsprung non-return valve that may not be used on any potable system. So you cannot use that. So it has to be a spring type non-return valve, and it needs to be properly accessible and maintainable, which means that you shouldn't have to remove it from the installation in order to maintain it. So we always look to the Y-shaped spring-loaded non-return valve. So the one that you can shut off on either side, and then you can take the cartridge out and check that there's any calcification on the seat, see that the spring is still okay, see that the washer is still okay, and then put the whole thing back together without draining anything, without having to cut pipes or remove fittings. That's the best. And of course it will be installed next to the pump, the circulation pump, because the circulation pump requires shut-off valves upstream and downstream, and so does the non-return valve. So if you put them together, it means that you've got that one set of shut-off valves functioning as well, it's functioning for both of those things, so the pump and the non-return valve. So that's what we'd look for with the Y-shaped non-return valve, spring-loaded.
Right. Well, unfortunately, guys, we have run out of time this morning. We do have a lot of questions left over, so we will have to speak on how exactly we're going to get to answer these. But for now, guys, I am going to go ahead and end off the session. I do want to say thank you to the panelists, guys. You guys really have put through quite a bit of effort this morning, obviously. I'm going to go ahead and end off the session now, guys. Thanks so much for joining us. Please remember the survey on the way out, and then we will keep you informed on how we're going to answer the rest of these questions. Thanks so much, guys. Enjoy the rest of your week. Bye-bye.